This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to find out how to volunteer, please contact LibriVox.org. Recording by Peter Yearsley. The Natural History of Selborne by Gilbert White. Letters to Thomas Pennant, Esquire, numbers 32 to 44. Letter 32 to Thomas Pennant, Esquire. Selborne, October the 29th, 1770. Dear Sir, after an ineffectual search in Linnaeus, Brisson, etc., I begin to suspect that I discern my brother's Hirundo hiberna in Scopoli's new discovered Hirundo rupestris, page 167. His description of supramurina subtus albida, rectrices macula ovali alba in latere inferno, pedes nudi nigri, rostrum nigrum, remiges obscuriores quam plume dorsales, rectrices remigibus concolores, cauda emarginata, nec forcipata. Reader's note. Mouse-coloured above, white beneath. Tail feathers with an oval white patch on the inside edge. Its feet are bare and black. Its beak is black. Primary feathers darker than its dorsal feathers, with the tail feathers the same colour. Tail notched, not forked. End reader's note. Agrees very well with the bird in question, but when he comes to advance that it is statura hirundinis urbicae, reader's note, the same size as a house martin, end reader's note, and that definitio hirundinis ripariae lineae huic quoque convenit, reader's note, the definition of the house martin by Linnaeus also applies to this, end reader's note. He in some measure invalidates all he has said. At least he shows at once that he compares them to these species merely from memory, for I have compared the birds themselves, and find they differ widely in every circumstance of shape, size, and colour. However, as you will have a specimen, I shall be glad to hear what your judgment is in the matter. Whether my brother is forestalled in his nondescript or not, he will have the credit of first discovering that they spend their winters under the warm and sheltery shores of Gibraltar and Barbary. Scopoli's characters of his ordines and genera are clear, just, and expressive, and much in the spirit of Linnaeus. These few remarks are the result of my first perusal of Scopoli's Annus Primus. The bane of our science is the comparing of one animal to the other by memory. For want of caution in this particular, Scopoli falls into errors. He is not so full with regard to the manners of his indigenous birds as might be wished, as you justly observe. His Latin is easy, elegant, and expressive, and very superior to Kramer's. I am pleased to see that my description of the moose corresponds so well with yours. I am, etc. Letter 33 to Thomas Pennant, Esquire. Selborne, November the 26th, 1770. Dear Sir, I was much pleased to see among the collection of birds from Gibraltar some of those short-winged English summer birds of passage, concerning whose departure we have made so much inquiry. Now, if these birds are found in Andalusia to migrate to and from Barbary, it may easily be supposed that those that come to us may migrate back to the continent, and spend their winters in some of the warmer parts of Europe. This is certain, that many soft-billed birds that come to Gibraltar appear there only in spring and autumn, seeming to advance in pairs towards the northward, for the sake of breeding during the summer months, and retiring in parties and broods towards the south at the decline of the year, so that the rock of Gibraltar is the great rendezvous and place of observation, from whence they take their departure each way towards Europe or Africa. It is therefore no mean discovery, I think, to find that our small short-winged summer birds of passage are to be seen spring and autumn on the very skirts of Europe. It is a presumptive proof of their emigrations. Scopoli seems to me to have found the Hirundo melba, the great Gibraltar swift, in Tyrol without knowing it. For what is his Hirundo alpina but the aforementioned bird in other words? Says he, omnia prioris, meaning the swift, sed pectus album, paula major priore. Reader's note. All is as in the former, but for the white breast, and it is a little bigger than the former. End reader's note. I do not suppose this to be a new species. It is true also of the melba that nidificat in excelsis alpium rupibus. Reader's note. It nests on high alpine peaks. End reader's note. Vide annum primum. My Sussex friend, a man of observation and good sense, but no naturalist, to whom I applied on account of the stone curlew, Oedicnemus, sends me the following account. In looking over my naturalist's journal for the month of April, I find the stone curlews are first mentioned on the 17th and 18th, which date seems to me rather late. They live with us all the spring and summer, and at the beginning of autumn prepare to take leave by getting together in flocks. They seem to me a bird of passage that may travel into some dry hilly country south of us, probably Spain, because of the abundance of sheep-walks in that country, for they spend their summers with us in such districts. This conjecture I hazard, as I have never met with any one that has seen them in England in the winter. I believe they are not fond of going near the water, but feed on earthworms, that are common on sheep-walks and downs. They breed on fallows and lay fields abounding with grey mossy flints, which much resemble their young in colour, among which they skulk and conceal themselves. They make no nest, but lay their eggs on the bare ground, producing in common but 2 at a time. There is reason to think their young run soon after they are hatched, and that the old ones do not feed them, but only lead them about at the time of feeding, which for the most part is in the night. Thus far my friend. In the manners of this bird you see there is something very analogous to the bustard, whom it also somewhat resembles in aspect and make, and in the structure of its feet. For a long time I have desired my relation to look out for these birds in Andalusia, and now he writes me word that for the first time he saw one dead in the market on the 3rd of September. When the Oedicnemus flies, it stretches out its legs straight behind, like an heron. I am, etc. Letter 34 to Thomas Pennant, Esquire, Selborne, March the 30th, 1771. Dear Sir, there is an insect with us, especially on chalky districts, which is very troublesome and teasing all the latter end of the summer, getting into people's skins, especially those of women and children, and raising tumours which itch intolerably. This animal, which we call an harvest bug, is very minute, scarce discernible to the naked eye, of a bright scarlet colour, and of the genus of Acarus. They are to be met with in gardens on kidney beans, or any legumens, but prevail only in the hot months of summer. Warreners, as some have assured me, are much infested by them on chalky downs, where these insects swarm sometimes to so infinite a degree as to discolour their nets, and to give them a reddish cast, while the men are so bitten as to be thrown into fevers. There is a small, long, shining fly in these parts, very troublesome to the housewife, by getting into the chimneys and laying its eggs in the bacon while it is drying. These eggs produce maggots called jumpers, which, harbouring in the gammons and best parts of the hogs, eat down to the bone, and make great waste. This fly I suspect to be a variety of the musca putris of Linnaeus. It is to be seen in the summer in the farm kitchens on the bacon racks, and about the mantelpieces, and on the ceilings. The insect that infests turnips and many crops in the garden, destroying often whole fields while in their seedling leaves, is an animal that wants to be better known. The country people here call it the turnip fly and black dolphin, but I know it to be one of the Chiloptera, the Chrysomela oleracea, saltatoria, femoribus posticis crassissimis. In very hot summers they abound to an amazing degree, and as you walk in a field or in a garden make a pattering like rain by jumping on the leaves of the turnips or cabbages. There is an oestrus known in these parts to every ploughboy, which, because it is omitted by Linnaeus, is also passed over by late writers, and that is the curvicorda of old Mouffet, mentioned by Derham in his Physico-Theology, page 250, an insect worthy of remark, for depositing its eggs, as it flies, in so dexterous a manner, on the single hairs of the legs and flanks of grass horses. But then Derham is mistaken when he advances that this oestrus is the parent of that wonderful star-tailed maggot which he mentions afterwards, for more modern entomologists have discovered that singular production to be derived from the egg of the musca chameleon. A full history of noxious insects hurtful in the field, garden, and house, suggesting all the known and likely means of destroying them, would be allowed by the public to be a most useful and important work. What knowledge there is of this sort lies scattered, and wants to be collected. Great improvements would soon follow, of course. A knowledge of the properties, economy, propagation, and, in short, of the life and conversation of these animals, is a necessary step to lead us to some method of preventing their depredations. As far as I am a judge, nothing would recommend entomology more than some neat plates that should well express the generic distinctions of insects according to Linnaeus; for I am well assured that many people would study insects could they set out with a more adequate notion of those distinctions than can be conveyed at first by words alone. Letter 35 to Thomas Pennant, Esquire. Selborne, 1771. Dear Sir, happening to make a visit to my neighbour's peacocks, I could not help observing that the trains of those magnificent birds appear by no means to be their tails, those long feathers growing not from their uropygium, but all up their backs. A range of short brown stiff feathers about 6 inches long, fixed in the uropygium, is the real tail, and serves as the fulcrum to prop the train, which is long and top-heavy when set on end. When the train is up, nothing appears of the bird before but its head and neck, but this would not be the case were those long feathers fixed only in the rump, as may be seen by the turkey-cock when in a strutting attitude. By a strong muscular vibration these birds can make the shafts of their long feathers clatter like the swords of a sword-dancer. They then trample very quick with their feet and run backwards towards the females. I should tell you that I have got an uncommon calculus egogropula taken out of the stomach of a fat ox. It is perfectly round, and about the size of a large Seville orange. Such are, I think, usually flat. Letter 36 to Thomas Pennant, Esquire. September, 1771. Dear Sir, the summer through I have seen but 2 of that large species of bat which I call Vespertilio altivolans, from its manner of feeding high in the air. I procured one of them, and found it to be a male, and made no doubt, as they accompanied together, that the other was a female; but happening in an evening or 2 to procure the other likewise, I was somewhat disappointed when it appeared to be also of the same sex. This circumstance, and the great scarcity of this sort, at least in these parts, occasions some suspicions in my mind whether it is really a species, or whether it may not be the male part of the more known species, one of which may supply many females, as is known to be the case in sheep and some other quadrupeds. But this doubt can only be cleared by a further examination, and some attention to the sex, of more specimens. All that I know at present is that my 2 were amply furnished with the parts of generation, much resembling those of a boar. In the extent of their wings they measured 14 inches and a half, and 4 inches and a half from the nose to the tip of the tail. Their heads were large, their nostrils bilobated, their shoulders broad and muscular, and their whole bodies fleshy and plump. Nothing could be more sleek and soft than their fur, which was of a bright chestnut colour. Their maws were full of food, but so macerated that the quality could not be distinguished. Their livers, kidneys, and hearts were large, and their bowels covered with fat. They weighed each, when entire, full 1 ounce and 1 drachm. Within the ear there was somewhat of a peculiar structure that I did not understand perfectly, but refer it to the observation of the curious anatomist. These creatures send forth a very rancid and offensive smell. Letter 37 to Thomas Pennant, Esquire. Selborne, 1771. Dear Sir, on the 12th of July I had a fair opportunity of contemplating the motions of the caprimulgus, or fern owl, as it was playing round a large oak that swarmed with scarabaei solstitiales, or fern chafers. The powers of its wing were wonderful, exceeding, if possible, the various evolutions and quick turns of the swallow genus. But the circumstance that pleased me most was that I saw it distinctly more than once put out its short leg while on the wing, and by a bend of the head deliver somewhat into its mouth. If it takes any part of its prey with its foot, as I have now the greatest reason to suppose it does these chafers, I no longer wonder at the use of its middle toe, which is curiously furnished with a serrated claw. Swallows and martins, the bulk of them I mean, have forsaken us sooner this year than usual, for on September the 22nd they rendezvoused in a neighbour's walnut-tree, where it seemed probable they had taken up their lodging for the night. At the dawn of the day, which was foggy, they arose all together in infinite numbers, occasioning such a rushing from the strokes of their wings against the hazy air as might be heard to a considerable distance. Since that no flock has appeared, only a few stragglers. Some swifts stayed late, till the 22nd of August, a rare instance, for they usually withdraw within the first week. On September the 24th, 3 or 4 ring ouzels appeared in my fields for the first time this season. How punctual are these visitors in their autumnal and spring migrations! Letter XXXVIII. To Thomas Pennant, Esquire. Selborne, March the 15th, 1773. Dear Sir, by my journal for last autumn it appears that the house martins bred very late, and stayed very late, in these parts; for on the 1st of October I saw young martins in their nests nearly fledged, and again on the 21st of October we had at the next house a nest full of young martins just ready to fly, and the old ones were hawking for insects with great alertness. The next morning the brood forsook their nest, and were flying round the village. From this day I never saw one of the swallow kind till November the 3rd, when 20 or perhaps 30 house martins were playing all day long by the side of the hanging wood, and over my fields. Did these small weak birds, some of which were nestlings 12 days ago, shift their quarters at this late season of the year to the other side of the northern tropics? Or rather, is it not more probable that the next church, ruin, chalk cliff, steep covert, or perhaps sandbank, lake, or pool, as a more northern naturalist would say, may become their hibernaculum, and afford them a ready and obvious retreat? We now begin to expect our vernal migration of ring ouzels every week. Persons worthy of credit assure me that the ring ouzels were seen at Christmas 1770 in the forest of Beer, on the southern verge of this county. Hence we may conclude that their migrations are only internal, and not extended to the continent southward, if they do at first come at all from the northern parts of this island only, and not from the north of Europe. Come from whence they will, it is plain, from the fearless disregard that they show for men or guns, that they have been little accustomed to places of much resort. Navigators mention that in the Isle of Ascension, and some other desolate districts, birds are so little acquainted with the human form that they settle on men's shoulders, and have no more dread of a sailor than they would have of a goat that was grazing. A young man at Lewes in Sussex assured me that about 7 years ago ring ouzels abounded so about that town in the autumn that he killed 16 himself in one afternoon. He added farther that some had appeared since in every autumn, but he could not find that any had been observed before the season in which he shot so many. I myself have found these birds in little parties in the autumn, cantoned all along the Sussex downs, wherever there were shrubs and bushes, from Chichester to Lewes, particularly in the autumn of 1770. I am, etc. Letter XXXIX. To Thomas Pennant, Esquire. Selborne, November the 9th, 1773. Dear Sir, as you desire me to send you such observations as may occur, I take the liberty of making the following remarks, that you may, according as you think me right or wrong, admit or reject what I here advance in your intended new edition of the British Zoology. The osprey was shot about a year ago at Frincham's Pond, a great lake at about 6 miles from hence, while it was sitting on the handle of a plough and devouring a fish. It used to precipitate itself into the water, and so take its prey by surprise. A great ash-coloured butcher-bird was shot last winter in Tisted Park, and a red-backed butcher-bird at Selborne. They are rare aves in this country. Crows go in pairs the whole year round. Cornish choughs abound, and breed on Beachy Head, and on all the cliffs of the Sussex coast. The common wild pigeon, or stock-dove, is a bird of passage in the south of England, seldom appearing till towards the end of November. Is usually the latest winter bird of passage. Before our beechen woods were so much destroyed, we had myriads of them, reaching in strings for a mile together as they went out in a morning to feed. They leave us early in spring. Where do they breed? The people of Hampshire and Sussex call the missel bird the stormcock, because it sings early in the spring in blowing, showery weather. Its song often commences with the year. With us it builds much in orchards. A gentleman assures me that he has taken the nests of ring-ousels on Dartmoor. They build in banks on the sides of streams. Titlarks not only sing sweetly as they sit on trees, but also as they play and toy about on the wing, and particularly while they are descending, and sometimes as they stand on the ground. Adamson's testimony seems to me to be a very poor evidence that European swallows migrate during our winter to Senegal. He does not talk at all like an ornithologist, and probably saw only the swallows of that country, which I know build within Governor O'Hara's hall against the roof. Had he known European swallows, would he not have mentioned the species? The house swallow washes by dropping into the water as it flies. This species appears commonly about a week before the house martin, and about 10 or 12 days before the swift. In 1772 there were young house martins in their nest till October the 23rd. The swift appears about 10 or 12 days later than the house swallows, that is, about the 24th or 26th of April. Whin chats and stone chatters stay with us the whole year. Some wheatears continue with us the winter through. Wagtails, all sorts, remain with us all the winter. Bullfinches, when fed on hemp seed, often become wholly black. We have vast flocks of female chaffinches all the winter, with hardly any males among them. When you say that in breeding time the cocksnipes make a bleating noise, and I a drumming, perhaps I should have rather said an humming, I suspect we mean the same thing. However, while they are playing about on the wing, they certainly make a loud piping with their mouths. But whether that bleating or humming is ventriloquous, or proceeds from the motion of their wings, I cannot say. But this I know, that when this noise happens, the bird is always descending, and his wings are violently agitated. Soon after the lapwings have done breeding, they congregate, and leaving the moors and marshes, betake themselves to downs and sheep walks. 2 years ago last spring, the little auk was found alive and unhurt, but fluttering and unable to rise, in a lane a few miles from Alresford, where there is a great lake. It was kept for a while, but died. I saw young teals taken alive in the ponds of Woolmer Forest in the beginning of July last, along with flappers or young wild ducks. Speaking of the swift, that page says it's drink the dew, whereas it should be it drinks on the wing, for all the swallow kind sip their water as they sweep over the face of pools or rivers. Like Virgil's bees, they drink flying, flumina summa libant. Reader's note, drink the surface of the stream. End reader's note. In this method of drinking, perhaps, this genus may be peculiar. Of the sedge bird, be pleased to say it sings most part of the night. Its notes are hurrying, but not unpleasing, and imitative of several birds, as the sparrow, swallow, skylark. When it happens to be silent in the night, by throwing a stone or clod into the bushes where it sits, you immediately set it a-singing; or, in other words, though it slumbers sometimes, yet as soon as it is awakened it reassumes its song. Letter 40 to Thomas Pennant, Esquire. Selborne, September the 2nd, 1774. Dear Sir, before your letter arrived, and of my own accord, I had been remarking and comparing the tails of the male and female swallow, and this ere any young broods appeared, so that there was no danger of confounding the dams with their pulley; and besides, as they were then always in pairs, and busied in the employ of nidification, there could be no room for mistaking the sexes, nor the individuals of different chimneys the one for the other. From all my observations, it constantly appears that each sex has the long feathers in its tail that give it that forked shape, with this difference, that they are longer in the tail of the male than in that of the female. Nightingales, when their young first come abroad and are helpless, make a plaintive and a jarring noise, and also a snapping or cracking, pursuing people along the hedge as they walk. These last sounds seem intended for menace and defiance. The grasshopper lark chirps all night in the height of summer. Swans turn white the 2nd year, and breed the 3rd. Weasels prey on moles, as appears by their being sometimes caught in mole traps. Sparrowhawks sometimes breed in old crows' nests, and the kestrel in churches and ruins. There are supposed to be 2 sorts of eels in the island of Ely. The threads sometimes discovered in eels are perhaps their young. The generation of eels is very dark and mysterious. Hen harriers breed on the ground, and seem never to settle on trees. When redstarts shake their tails, they move them horizontally, as dogs do when they fawn. The tail of a wagtail, when in motion, bobs up and down like that of a jaded horse. Hedge sparrows have a remarkable flirt with their wings in breeding time. As soon as frosty mornings come, they make a very piping, plaintive noise. Many birds which become silent about midsummer reassume their notes again in September, as the thrush, blackbird, woodlark, willow wren, etc. Hence August is by far the most mute month, the spring, summer, and autumn through. Are birds induced to sing again because the temperament of autumn resembles that of spring? Linnaeus ranges plants geographically. Palms inhabit the tropics, grasses the temperate zones, and mosses and lichens the polar circles. No doubt animals may be classed in the same manner with propriety. House sparrows build under eaves in the spring. As the weather becomes hotter, they get out for coolness, and nest in plum trees and apple trees. These birds have been known sometimes to build in rooks' nests, and sometimes in the forks of boughs under rooks' nests. As my neighbour was housing a rick, he observed that his dogs devoured all the little red mice that they could catch, but rejected the common mice, and that his cats ate the common mice, refusing the red. Redbreasts sing all through the spring, summer, and autumn. The reason that they are called autumn songsters is because in the 2 first seasons their voices are drowned and lost in the general chorus. In the latter their song becomes distinguishable. Many songsters of the autumn seem to be the young cock redbreasts of that year. Notwithstanding the prejudices in their favour, they do much mischief in gardens to the summer fruits. Note. They eat also the berries of the ivy, the honeysuckle, and the euonymus europaeus, or spindle tree. End note. The titmouse, which early in February begins to make 2 quaint notes, like the whetting of a saw, is the marsh titmouse. The great titmouse sings with 3 cheerful, joyous notes, and begins about the same time. Wrens sing all the winter through, frost excepted. House martins came remarkably late this year, both in Hampshire and Devonshire. Is this circumstance for or against either hiding or migration? Most birds drink sipping at intervals, but pigeons take a long continued draught, like quadrupeds. Notwithstanding what I have said in a former letter, no grey crows were ever known to breed on Dartmoor. It was my mistake. The appearance and flying of the Scarabaeus solstitialis, or fern-chafer, commence with the month of July, and cease about the end of it. These scarabs are the constant food of caprimulgi, or fern-owls, through that period. They abound on the chalky downs and in some sandy districts, but not in the clays. In the garden of the Black Bear Inn, in the town of Reading, is a stream or canal running under the stables and out into the fields on either side of the road. In this water are many carps, which lie rolling about in sight, being fed by travellers, who amuse themselves by tossing them bread. But as soon as the weather grows at all severe, these fishes are no longer seen, because they retire under the stables, where they remain till the return of spring. Do they lie in a torpid state? If they do not, how are they supported? The note of the white-throat, which is continually repeated, and often attended with odd gesticulations on the wing, is harsh and displeasing. These birds seem of a pugnacious disposition, for they sing with an erected crest and attitudes of rivalry and defiance. Are shy and wild in breeding time, avoiding neighbourhoods and haunting lonely lanes and commons, nay, even the very tops of the Sussex downs, where there are bushes and covert. But in July and August they bring their broods into gardens and orchards, and make great havoc among the summer fruits. The blackcap has in common a full, sweet, deep, loud and wild pipe, yet that strain is of short continuance, and his motions are desultory. But when that bird sits calmly and engages in song in earnest, he pours forth very sweet but inward melody, and expresses great variety of soft and gentle modulations, superior perhaps to those of any of our warblers, the nightingale excepted. Blackcaps mostly haunt orchards and gardens. While they warble, their throats are wonderfully distended. The song of the redstart is superior, though somewhat like, that of the white-throat. Some birds have a few more notes than others. Sitting very placidly on the top of a tree in a village, the cock sings from morning to night. He affects neighbourhoods, and avoids solitude, and loves to build in orchards and about houses. With us he perches on the vane of a tall maypole. The flycatcher is of all our summer birds the most mute and the most familiar. It also appears the last of any. It builds in a vine or a sweetbriar, against the wall of a house, or in the hole of a wall, or on the end of a beam or plate, and often close to the post of a door, where people are going in and out all day long. This bird does not make the least pretension to song, but uses a little inward wailing note when it thinks its young in danger from cats or other annoyances. It breeds but once, and retires early. Selborne parish alone can and has exhibited at times more than half the birds that are ever seen in all Sweden. The former has produced more than 120 species, the latter only 221. Let me add also that it has shown nearly half the species that were ever known in Great Britain. Note: Sweden 221, Great Britain 252 species. End note. On a retrospect, I observe that my long letter carries with it a quaint and magisterial air, and is very sententious; but when I recollect that you requested stricture and anecdote, I hope you will pardon the didactic manner for the sake of the information it may happen to contain. Letter XLI. To Thomas Pennant, Esquire. It is a matter of curious inquiry to trace out how those species of soft-billed birds that continue with us the winter through subsist during the dead months. The imbecility of birds seems not to be the only reason why they shun the rigour of our winters, for the robust wryneck, so much resembling the hardy race of woodpeckers, migrates, while the feeble little golden-crowned wren, that shadow of a bird, braves our severest frosts without availing himself of houses or villages, to which most of our winter birds crowd in distressful seasons, while this keeps aloof in fields and woods. But perhaps this may be the reason why they may often perish, and why they are almost as rare as any bird we know. I have no reason to doubt but that the soft-billed birds which winter with us subsist chiefly on insects in their Aurelia state. All the species of wagtails in severe weather haunt shallow streams near their spring-heads, where they never freeze, and by wading pick out the Aurelias of the genus of Phryganiae, etc. Hedge-sparrows frequent sinks and gutters in hard weather, where they pick up crumbs and other sweepings, and in mild weather they procure worms, which are stirring every month in the year, as any one may see that will only be at the trouble of taking a candle to a grass-plot on any mild winter's night. Red-breasts and wrens in the winter haunt outhouses, stables, and barns, where they find spiders and flies that have laid themselves up during the cold season. But the grand support of the soft-billed birds in winter is that infinite profusion of Aureliae of the Lepidoptera ordo, which is fastened to the twigs of trees and their trunks, to the pales and walls of gardens and buildings, and is found in every cranny and cleft of rock or rubbish, and even in the ground itself. Every species of titmouse winters with us. They have what I call a kind of intermediate bill between the hard and the soft, between the Linnaean genera of Fringilla and Motacilla. One species alone spends its whole time in the woods and fields, never retreating for succour in the severest seasons to houses and neighbourhoods, and that is the delicate long-tailed titmouse, which is almost as minute as the golden-crowned wren. But the blue titmouse, or nun, Parus caeruleus, the coal-mouse, Parus ater, the great black-headed titmouse, Fringillago, and the marsh titmouse, Parus palustris, All resort at times to buildings, and in hard weather particularly. The great titmouse, driven by stress of weather, much frequents houses, and in deep snows I have seen this bird, while it hung with its back downwards, to my no small delight and admiration, draw straw lengthwise from out the eaves of thatched houses, in order to pull out the flies that were concealed between them, and that in such numbers that they quite defaced the thatch, and gave it a ragged appearance. The blue titmouse, or nun, is a great frequenter of houses, and a general devourer. Besides insects, it is very fond of flesh, for it frequently picks bones on dunghills. It is a vast admirer of suet, and haunts butchers' shops. When a boy, I have known 20 in a morning caught with snap mouse-traps, baited with tallow or suet. It will also pick holes in apples left on the ground, and be well entertained with the seeds on the head of a sunflower. The blue, marsh, and great titmice will, in very severe weather, carry away barley and oat straws from the sides of ricks. How the wheatear and whin-chat support themselves in winter cannot be so easily ascertained, since they spend their time on wild heaths and warrens, the former especially, where there are stone quarries. Most probably it is that their maintenance arises from the Aurelii of the Lepidoptera order, which furnish them with a plentiful table in the wilderness. I am, etc. Letter XLII To Thomas Pennant, Esquire, Selborne, March the 9th, 1775. Dear Sir, some future faunist, a man of fortune, will, I hope, extend his visits to the kingdom of Ireland, a new field, and a country little known to the naturalist. He will not, it is to be wished, undertake that tour unaccompanied by a botanist, because the mountains have scarcely been sufficiently examined, and the southerly counties of so mild an island may possibly afford some plants little to be expected within the British dominions. A person of a thinking turn of mind will draw many just remarks from the modern improvements of that country, both in arts and agriculture, where premiums obtained long before they were heard of with us. The manners of the wild natives, their superstitions, their prejudices, their sordid way of life, will extort from him many useful reflections. He should also take with him an able draftsman, for he must by no means pass over the noble castles and seats, the extensive and picturesque lakes and waterfalls, and the lofty stupendous mountains, so little known, and so engaging to the imagination when described and exhibited in a lively manner. Such a work would be well received. As I have seen no modern map of Scotland, I cannot pretend to say how accurate or particular any such may be; but this I know, that the best old maps of that kingdom are very defective. The great obvious defect that I have remarked in all maps of Scotland that have fallen in my way is a want of a coloured line or stroke that shall exactly define the just limits of that district called the Highlands. Moreover, all the great avenues to that mountainous and romantic country want to be well distinguished. The military roads formed by General Wade are so great and Roman-like an undertaking that they well merit attention. My old map, Moll's map, takes notice of Fort William, but could not mention the other forts that have been erected long since. Therefore a good representation of the chain of forts should not be omitted. The celebrated zigzag up the Corriarich must not be passed over. Moll takes notice of Hamilton and Drumlanrig, and such capital houses, but a new survey no doubt should represent every seat and castle remarkable for any great event, or celebrated for its paintings, etc. Lord Breadalbane's seat and beautiful policy are too curious and extraordinary to be omitted. The seat of the Earl of Eglinton, near Glasgow, is worthy of notice. The pine plantations of that nobleman are very grand and extensive indeed. I am, etc. Letter XLIII To Thomas Pennant, Esquire. Dear Sir, a pair of honey buzzards, Buteo opivorus sive vestivorus Raii, built them a large shallow nest, composed of twigs and lined with dead beechen leaves, upon a small slender beech near the middle of Selborne Hanger, in the summer of 1780. In the middle of the month of June a bold boy climbed this tree, though standing on so steep and dizzy a situation, and brought down an egg, the only one in the nest, which had been sat on for some time, and contained the embryo of a young bird. The egg was smaller, and not so round as those of the common buzzard, was dotted at each end with small red spots, and surrounded in the middle with a broad bloody zone. The hen bird was shot, and answered exactly to Mr. Ray's description of that species, had a black cere, short thick legs, and a long tail. When on the wing, this species may be easily distinguished from the common buzzard by its hawk-like appearance, small head, wings not so blunt, and longer tail. This specimen contained in its craw some limbs of frogs, and many grey snails without shells. The irides of the eyes of this bird were of a beautiful bright yellow colour. About the 10th of July, in the same summer, a pair of sparrow-hawks bred in an old crow's nest on a low beech in the same hanger, and as their brood, which was numerous, began to grow up, became so daring and ravenous that they were a terror to all the dames in the village that had chickens or ducklings under their care. A boy climbed the tree, and found the young so fledged that they all escaped from him, but discovered that a good house had been kept. The larder was well stored with provisions, for he brought down a young blackbird, jay, and house-martin, all clean picked, and some half devoured. The old birds had been observed to make sad havoc for some days among the new-flown swallows and martins, which, being but lately out of their nests, had not acquired those powers and command of wing that enabled them, when more mature, to set such enemies at defiance. Letter 44 to Thomas Pennant, Esquire. Selborne, November 30th, 1780. Dear Sir, every incident that occasions a renewal of our correspondence will ever be pleasing and agreeable to me. As to the wild wood-pigeon, the Aenus or vinago of Ray, I am much of your mind, and see no reason for making it the origin of the common house-dove, but suppose those that have advanced that opinion may have been misled by another appellation often given to the Aenus, which is that of stock-dove. Unless the stock-dove in the winter varies greatly in manners from itself in summer, no species seems more unlikely to be domesticated and to make an house-dove. We very rarely see the latter settle on trees at all, nor does it ever haunt the woods; but the former, as long as it stays with us, from November perhaps to February, lives the same wild life with the ring-dove, Palumbus torquatus, frequents coppices and groves, supports itself chiefly by mast, and delights to roost in the tallest beeches. Could it be known in what manner stock-doves build, the doubt would be settled with me at once, provided they construct their nests on trees like the ring-dove, as I much suspect they do. You received, you say, last spring a stock-dove from Sussex, and are informed that they sometimes breed in that county. But why did not your correspondent determine the place of its nidification, whether on rocks, cliffs, or trees? If he was not an adroit ornithologist, I should doubt the fact, because people with us perpetually confound the stock-dove with the ring-dove. For my own part, I readily concur with you in supposing that house-doves are derived from the small blue rock-pigeon, for many reasons. In the first place, the wild stock-dove is manifestly larger than the common house-dove, against the usual rule of domestication, which generally enlarges the breed. Again, these two remarkable black spots on the remiges of each wing of the stock-dove, which are so characteristic of the species, would not, one should think, be totally lost by its being reclaimed, but would often break out among its descendants. But what is worth 100 arguments is the instance you give in Sir Roger Mostyn's house-doves in Carnarvonshire, which, though tempted by plenty of food and gentle treatment, can never be prevailed on to inhabit their cote for any time, but as soon as they begin to breed, betake themselves to the fastnesses of Ormshead, and deposit their young in safety amidst the inaccessible caverns and precipices of that stupendous promontory. Naturam expellas furca, tamen usque recurret. Reader's note. You may expel nature with a pitchfork, but she will always return. End reader's note. I have consulted a sportsman, now in his 78th year, who tells me that 50 or 60 years back, when the beechen woods were much more extensive than at present, the number of wood-pigeons was astonishing, that he has often killed near 20 in a day, and that with a long wild-fowl piece he has shot 7 or 8 at a time on the wing, as they came wheeling over his head. He moreover adds, which I was not aware of, that often there were among them little parties of small blue doves, which he calls rockias. The food of these numberless emigrants was beech-mast and some acorns, and particularly barley, which they collected in the stubbles. But of late years, since the vast increase of turnips, that vegetable has furnished a great part of their support in hard weather, and the holes they pick in these roots greatly damage the crop. From this food their flesh has contracted a rancidness which occasions them to be rejected by nicer judges of eating, who thought them before a delicate dish. They were shot not only as they were feeding in the fields, and especially in snowy weather, but also at the close of the evening, by men who lay in ambush among the woods and groves to kill them as they came in to roost. Note. Some old sportsmen say that the main part of these flocks used to withdraw as soon as the heavy Christmas frosts were over. End note. These are the principal circumstances relating to this wonderful internal migration, which with us takes place towards the end of November, and ceases early in the spring. Last winter we had in Selborne High Wood about 100 of these doves, but in former times the flocks were so vast, not only with us but all the district round, that on mornings and evenings they traversed the air like rooks in strings, reaching for a mile together. When they thus rendezvoused here by thousands, if they happened to be suddenly roused from their roost-trees on an evening, their rising all at once was like the sound of thunder heard remote. It will by no means be foreign to the present purpose to add that I had a relation in this neighbourhood who made it a practice for a time, whenever he could procure the eggs of a ring-dove, to place them under a pair of doves that were sitting in his own pigeon-house, hoping thereby, if he could bring about a coalition, to enlarge his breed, and teach his own doves to beat out into the woods, and to support themselves by mast. The plan was plausible, but something always interrupted the success; for though the birds were usually hatched, and sometimes grew to half their size, yet none ever arrived at maturity. I myself have seen these foundlings in their nest displaying a strange ferocity of nature, so as scarcely to bear to be looked at, and snapping with their bills by way of menace. In short, they always died, perhaps for want of proper sustenance, but the owner thought that by their fierce and wild demeanour they frighted their foster-mothers, and so were starved. Virgil, as a familiar occurrence, by way of simile, describes a dove haunting the cavern of a rock in such engaging numbers that I cannot refrain from quoting the passage, and John Dryden has rendered it so happily in our language that without further excuse I shall add his translation also. Quelis spelunca subito commota columba, qui domus et dulces letebroso in pumice nidi, verto in arva volans, plausumque exterita pennis, dat tecto ingentum, mox aere lapsi quieto, radit iter liquidum, celeres neque commovet alas. As when a dove her rocky hold forsakes, roused, in her fright her sounding wings she shakes, the cavern rings with clattering, out she flies, and leaves her callow care, and cleaves the skies. At first she flutters, but at length she springs to smoother flight, and shoots upon her wings. I am, etc. The end of letters 32 to 44 to Thomas Pennant, Esquire, in Gilbert White's The Natural History of Selborne.